So education is about the future in a way that other social practices simply are not. What led me personally to the study of futures and eventually to the study of existential risks and the Metacrisis was only just a serious concern about the future in which our children will grow up. All educators are futurists in this way. They are uniquely invested in thinking about what the future will look like and how it might be made to look better. Another group of people that really thinks about the future is technologists. They are also trying to shape the future. And although it is not often noticed, this has made technologists particularly interested in education. For decades now, digital technologies have been spreading into the primary contexts of socialization, homes, and schools. With the advent of artificial intelligence embedded in conversational agents and design ambitions towards deep anthropomorphism, there is a very serious move underway to replace teachers and parents with machines. There are many risks related to AI. This is the one that must be faced by educators, or there will be no more educators, as history will give way to the automation of socialization. These plans to make human socialization technologically obsolete are not new. At least since the Industrial Revolution, the application of technology to schooling has been a predominant driver of major reorganizations of educational practice. Since the end of World War II, there have been wildly ambitious plans for the future of educational technology, building on the legacy of industrial schooling. These fantasies have concerned the transformation of schooling into an enterprise involving advanced technologies. I want to argue against only a certain extreme version of this kind of future-oriented technological imagination. Later in this talk and elsewhere, I have offered design principles for the responsible use of AI in educational contexts, but these only make sense after understanding what is at stake if advanced technologies are misused. Today, we are seeing the fruition of these fantasies about the future of education. What used to be science fiction is becoming everyday reality. Experiences once dreamed about only by the most extreme technology enthusiasts are now going mainstream. The future is an object of polarized and extreme speculation. Often the lives of future children are discounted in favor of realizing some fantastic technological possibility. I want to argue that we need to stop making literal these archetypal imaginations about our future. In the context of rapid technological change, we need to begin looking realistically and holistically at educational futures. The current state of research on how humans interact with AI conversational agents is nascent. I would argue that this research is partial and is insufficiently critical. A large percentage of this research is coming from industry. It is produced by the same companies that are bringing the tools to market. Academic research is almost entirely responding to products brought to market by companies like OpenAI and DeepMind, which have massive R&D budgets and are best equipped to do large-scale studies on their own products. Educational research in AI, on AI particularly, this educational research ends up being about how children, teachers, and schools have been or ought to manage being on the receiving end of advanced technologies that are pushed on them. The products do not reflect the expressed needs or desires of educators, parents, or children. Yet all now live with these technologies increasingly embedded in their lives. The products being brought to market suggest what designers believe are the benefits to be sought from AI conversational agents. The tools aim for personalization, which would customize learning based on psychometrically calibrated interactions with increasingly humanoid avatars. The tools also advertise emotional safety, shielding users from the judgments of other humans, providing an experience that appears to be under the control of the user. AI conversational agents are believed to be on a path to be more effective than human teachers, based on customization and sheer asymmetric intelligence. Designs are seeking to create AI that enhances human capacity, making you smarter, more productive, allowing for unprecedented forms of creative collaboration. Of course, machines are faster than humans at basically everything, so the rates of learning will go up, as will the speed of information transmission and the completion of tasks like coding and writing. And finally, AI conversational agents are said to be eventually able to be everywhere and to meet the needs of all people, bypassing bad teachers and without forms of discrimination that plague human schools. This leads to a vision where perfect AI tutors can scale rapidly to solve rapidly multiplying educational crises. This is something that is currently the aim of a growing number of well-equipped entrepreneurs. Again, I want to argue against that vision, wherein today we would represent the last human educators. But I do not thereby argue against the use of advanced technologies in education. I simply want the discussion about risks to be much more rigorous. There are untold risks involved with introducing the most advanced technologies on Earth directly to children without testing. The first and most obvious one is cognitive diminishment, where unbuilt skills remain that way and already built skills atrophy. Meanwhile, the sense that you are a know-it-all increases. A less discussed but actually essential risk is that the fascination, awe, and spectacle of the AI, which I think educators are under the spell of now, creates blindness as to what the technology actually is, especially its ecological, physical, and economic footprints. It is clear already that heavy use of AI agents creates emotional dependencies that resemble addictions. It induces withdrawal anxieties, creating an overly trusting sense of the tool and what it can do. Now we're starting to get to the more deeper ones. These tools also have the ability to capture the epistemological center of gravity of the mind. They're displacing human documents as canonical. They are pretending omniscience, and they are also inexorably persuasive. This means you can't not learn from it. This places youth under control in a way no human teacher or parent ever could. As anthropomorphism deepens, the emotional relationships become more complex, and attachment patterns are developed in which machines are used for emotional support and begin to be part of what allows the identity and personality to function. This climaxes with a mistaken conferral of personhood to machines, where the AI agent is attributed consciousness and conferred social statuses and moral authorities once reserved for human persons. So imagine an autonomous large language model implanted in lifelike robotics and embedded in domestic ecologies, meaning the home. It becomes by design understood and treated as a family member and interacts with the children as a nanny and tutor to the extent that children form attachment relations and feel moral obligations towards it, eventually preferring time with the AI to any person. I have many arguments that this is a bad outcome and should be avoided. Yet this is surprisingly controversial in some circles, given how obvious it is to many people that children should not be raised by machines. The arguments I have outlined elsewhere show that generative AI and in principle all automata lack those qualities that are required to be conferred social statuses, such as the status of being someone who is responsible for what they say. This means, for example, an AI conversational agent cannot make a promise by any reasonable definition of that act. It can, of course, display on the screen or through audio make sounds like, "I promise not to display citations that do not exist." But there is no relationship of obligation thereby established such that moral consequences follow if a citation is later given that is a hallucination. Something has happened more akin to a malfunction rather than a social violation or a lie. The machine did not and cannot in principle make or break a promise to you. It would be a very fundamental mistake to think and act as if it could. Yet this is exactly the mistake that children and adults are being led to make by design. Stretching our language and concepts so that somehow, in some way, the machine is making a promise or could be treated as such or as if proves the point. Justifying the conferral of social statuses to machines is difficult to do, even as the impulse to anthropomorphize is strong. Coherently arguing that LLMs can be properly understood as taking on personal moral obligation and is therefore capable of, for example, making a promise, this is counterintuitive to the extent of requiring faith, speculative metaphysics, and suspensions of disbelief. Many scholars resort to euphemistic redefinitions of folk psychological vocabularies to make certain words no longer about the distinctly biologically and human practices they evolved to describe. Indeed, even the idea that you are chatting or having a conversation as the core frame of human-to-machine interaction is an example of this. Conversation requires a shared field of value, mutual understanding, mutual recognition, none of which can emerge between human and machine. Although there are, of course, some similarities, humans and machines are fundamentally different in ways that make the conferral of personhood to a machine always in principle some kind of mistake. I want to argue it is wrong both in the epistemic and ethical sense. But as I said, my view here is controversial. Some neuroscientists, computer scientists, and philosophers argue that humans are best understood as always basically already being fundamentally like computers, offering a stance of strong metaphysical computationalism, which is really a new breed of materialistic determinism. From this perspective, which reduces human psychology itself to automata-like mechanisms, there is no reason not to confer personhood on a computer complex enough to act in ways that make it indistinguishable from a human. It just happens to be made of silicon rather than carbon as a computational substrate. The question of if there is a mind, consciousness, or soul is seen as foolish because humans themselves have been proven not to have those. We always already only treat each other as if we have minds. Science continues to show us we're just causal processes. Therefore, conferring personhood to a machine is really no different than conferring personhood to your friend. There is behind this argument a strong, unexpressed desire to not be lonely among the machines, to somehow turn a fascinating something into a companionable someone. Bracketing metaphysics for now, it can still be said that from the perspective of socialization of young humans, AI systems designed to simulate communicating with humans anthropomorphically have unique risks. These are in some sense orthogonal to the risks typically discussed concerning AI because the consequences do not involve immediate physical or economic catastrophes. Instead, the risks concern widespread disruption of intergenerational transmission processes, creating a diffuse and almost imperceptible dehumanization into insanity due to the loss of the traits and environments that have characterized human sapience. This would mean the end of socialization as we have known it. The personhood conferral problem and related risks become clearest in the context of current markets for AI-enabled therapy and tutoring systems. The evolution of these systems into AI-enabled socialization systems writ large, replacing parents, family, and friends, is an eventuality that emerges from the advancement of other adjacent technologies like robotics, large language models, and sensors. This trajectory of technological innovation requires creating by design delusional states concerning the nature of computational behaviors and symbolic outputs. This puts at risk the core of human socialization practices by confusing what it means to correctly recognize personhood. Ultimately, in the long run, we create conditions in which future generations no longer engage in human-to-human based socialization practices and instead are mainly raised by machines that simulate being human. Humans have always been raised by other humans in relation to technology. They have never been raised directly by deeply anthropomorphic technology itself. There is a major risk that the first generation predominantly raised by machines will become unable to identify as members of the same species as their ancestors. The first cyborg generation will have been removed without consent from the moral universe inhabited by all prior humans. It is possible to irresponsibly use advanced technologies in ways that undermine irreplaceable aspects of human socialization and, in effect, disallow the emergent personality to understand itself as human, even though it is otherwise biologically human. The greatest risk here involves the loss of the species-specific traits that have been the source of our shared humanity since the emergence of Homo sapiens sapiens, the radical disruption of human-to-human intergenerational as an embodied joint attentional practice, through the interference of AI. This marks an historical pivot, best understood as a speciation event, in which human beings will no longer engage the socialization processes that have historically conferred the possibility of moral agency and self-understanding as a human. These futures can be avoided if we take up a right relationship with technologies, specifically one that can ground the intrinsic value of personhood and disambiguate this from the unique value that is offered by machines. This will involve regulation of advanced technologies and the implementation of design principles that are superordinate to profit in the marketplace of educational technologies. There's a bunch of design principles here, which are extremely important. Basically, we do not want to make consumer-facing products that are deeply anthropomorphic. I have a vision in the book, Education in a Time Between Worlds, of what's called the Distributed Educational Hub Network, which uses advanced technologies to maximize human-to-human relationship, rather than mediating and interfering and actually breaking down the structure of human-to-human teacherly authority. So I'm not a Luddite. The only future that could actually resolve the metacrisis is one where there's a radical transformation, leaving behind modern schooling without leaving behind the commitments to humanity that were implicit in the advancement that modern schooling was, let's say, over the feudal educational systems. So there's a lot more to say. Obviously, thank you for your patience.